Television horror in the 1980s was never supposed to cross certain lines. It aired in living rooms. It played during family hours. And yet these films ignored the rules completely. They terrified children. They disturbed parents. They pushed psychological and emotional boundaries far beyond what broadcast standards could contain. These are the made-for-TV horror movies that went way too far. And once you remember them, you never forget them. Number 12. The Woman in Black, 1989. This adaptation of Susan Hill's novel arrived quietly on British television and left audiences shaken long after the screen faded to black. Unlike flashy horror films of the era, this production relied on silence, restraint, and creeping dread, and that made it far more disturbing than viewers expected from a TV movie. The story follows a rational lawyer sent to a remote village to settle an estate. What he finds instead is a ghost story built on grief, punishment, and unresolved trauma. The Woman in Black is not a jump scare villain. She is a presence, a silent observer, and every time she appears, a child dies. That implication alone pushed this film into dangerous territory for broadcast television. What truly made it go too far was its ending. Television horror usually offered safety or closure. This film offered none. It punished its protagonist completely. The final moments deliver one of the bleakest endings ever aired on television. No redemption, no escape, only inevitability. Parents complained, viewers were stunned, and the BBC quietly learned that subtle horror could be more devastating than gore. The Woman in Black proved that psychological terror had no business being this effective on a TV screen, and yet it was, deeply, permanently. Number 11. Something is Out There, 1988. Marketed as a science fiction thriller, this NBC miniseries quickly revealed itself as something far darker. What began as an alien mystery turned into a brutal body horror story disguised as primetime entertainment. And audiences were not prepared. The creature at the center of the story hunts humans with disturbing intelligence. Its attacks are graphic by television standards. Victims are stalked, dissected, and displayed in ways that echoed theatrical horror films rather than network programming. The implication of sexual violence and bodily invasion pushed boundaries even further. What truly shocked viewers was the tone. This was not campy sci-fi. It was cold, clinical, and violent. The investigative structure gave each murder weight, making the audience sit with the consequences rather than cutting away. Broadcast standards were tested repeatedly. Censors reportedly forced edits, yet enough remained to scar young viewers watching at home. Something is Out There blurred the line between TV movie and R-rated horror, and proved networks were willing to gamble with fear if ratings followed. Number 10. Poison Ivy, 1985. This made-for-television thriller weaponized paranoia and domestic fear in a way that unsettled audiences far more than expected. Poison Ivy focused on a family slowly unraveling under psychological manipulation and unseen danger. What made it horrifying was how plausible it felt. No monsters, no supernatural elements, just control gaslighting and emotional abuse escalating toward violence. The threat lived inside the home, and television audiences were forced to watch it unfold step by step. The film pushed limits by showing how easily authority, trust, and family bonds could be turned into weapons. Scenes involving children in danger crossed an invisible line for many viewers. This was not escapist horror. It was intimate, uncomfortable, and deeply unsettling. Poison Ivy proved that horror did not need blood to go too far. It only needed realism. And once viewers recognized themselves in the fear, the damage was done. Number 9. The Midnight Hour, 1985. At first glance, The Midnight Hour looks like harmless Halloween fun. A small town, teenagers, a night of costumes and parties. But once the clock strikes midnight, the film transforms into something far darker than network television had prepared audiences for. The story unleashes a wave of supernatural chaos on an unsuspecting town. Witches rise from graves, zombies roam streets, and ancient curses awaken without mercy. Unlike family-friendly Halloween specials, this film shows real consequences. Characters die, innocence disappears, and the tone grows increasingly grim as the night progresses. What pushed this movie too far was its refusal to protect its young characters. Teenagers are hunted relentlessly. The supernatural threats feel aggressive and cruel rather than playful. Several scenes linger on fear, panic, and hopelessness in ways that felt far closer to theatrical horror than TV entertainment. Parents expecting a light seasonal movie were caught off guard. Children watching were genuinely terrified. The midnight hour crossed a line by disguising serious horror inside a festive wrapper. It proved that television could betray expectations, and once it did, the damage lingered long after Halloween ended. Number 8. Special Bulletin, 1983. Special Bulletin did not rely on monsters or gore. Instead, it weaponized realism. Presented as a live news broadcast, this film convinced many viewers they were watching an actual national emergency unfold in real time. The plot follows journalists covering a terrorist nuclear threat in Charleston Harbor. Cameras shake, information contradicts itself, authorities panic, and the audience is trapped inside the chaos with no comforting narration to separate fiction from reality. What made this TV movie go too far was its emotional manipulation. Viewers were not prepared for the illusion of authenticity. Many believed the events were real. Phone lines jammed, stations received frantic calls, and fear spread rapidly. The film escalates toward catastrophe without mercy. There is no heroic rescue, no comforting resolution, just lost confusion and aftermath. Nuclear horror had never been portrayed with such clinical honesty on television before. Special Bulletin crossed a line by proving that fear does not need monsters, it only needs credibility. And for an audience watching from home, that made it unbearable. Number 7. Threads, 1984. Threads remains one of the most devastating films ever broadcast on television. Framed as a docudrama, it follows ordinary families in Sheffield as nuclear war becomes inevitable. There are no heroes, no escape plans, only collapse. What makes Threads unbearable is its patience. It does not rush toward destruction. It shows the slow erosion of society, food shortages, medical collapse, radiation sickness, and generational trauma unfolding in horrifying detail. Unlike most disaster films, Threads refuses spectacle. The violence is quiet, casual, and relentless. Children starve, survivors lose language, humanity regresses. The film continues long after most movies would fade out. This was broadcast television, accessible to families, and utterly uncompromising. Complaints flooded in. Viewers reported nightmares for years. Governments reportedly discussed its psychological impact. Threads went too far because it showed truth without mercy, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. Number 6. The Day After, 1983. When The Day After aired on American television, it became a national event. Schools warned parents, broadcasters issued disclaimers, and entire cities stopped what they were doing to watch. What followed was not entertainment. It was trauma delivered directly into living rooms. The film depicts a nuclear exchange between the United States and the Soviet Union and focuses on ordinary citizens in Kansas City and nearby towns. There are no hardened heroes, only families, doctors, soldiers, and children trying to understand what is happening as the world collapses around them. What pushed this TV movie too far was its directness. Missiles launch without warning. Cities evaporate. Survivors stumble through ash and silence. Burn sickness and blindness are shown with uncomfortable clarity. The film does not cut away quickly. It forces viewers to look. Even more disturbing is what comes after the explosions. Society disintegrates. Medicine fails. Food disappears. Authority becomes meaningless. The film lingers on despair rather than action. Hope is fragile and often crushed. Millions of viewers reported shock, nausea, and sleeplessness. Counselors were reportedly made available in some schools the next day. Political leaders publicly commented on its impact. The Day After crossed a line by making nuclear horror personal. It was no longer abstract. It was neighbors, homes, and children. For television audiences used to comfort and resolution, this film delivered none. It did not ask if nuclear war was survivable. It showed that it was not, and that was more than many were ready to face. Number 5. Invitation to Hell, 1984. Invitation to Hell begins as a satire of suburban life, a perfect gated community. Friendly neighbors, exclusive amenities, everything promised by the American dream. But beneath the smiles, something ancient and malevolent waits patiently. The story follows a family lured into a luxurious housing development that slowly reveals itself as a literal gateway to hell. Residents who fail to conform are punished. children are manipulated, and individuality becomes a liability. What made this TV movie go too far was its symbolism combined with genuine horror imagery. Scenes involving demonic rituals, burning bodies, and psychological torment pushed broadcast standards to their limits. This was not subtle allegory. It was explicit condemnation of conformity and consumerism wrapped in fire and screaming souls. The presence of children in peril made the horror even more uncomfortable. Television rarely placed young characters so close to eternal damnation, yet Invitation to Hell did so repeatedly, without blinking. Audiences expecting a light thriller were confronted with religious terror and existential dread. The idea that hell could exist behind white picket fences struck a nerve, especially during an era obsessed with suburban perfection. Invitation to Hell crossed the line by suggesting that evil thrives not in shadows, but in neighborhoods that look safe, and once that idea took root, it was impossible to shake. Number 4. The Intruder Within, 1981, set almost entirely inside a hospital. The Intruder Within transforms a place of healing into a nightmare of violation and helplessness. The film follows a pregnant woman experiencing a medical emergency only to discover that something else has entered her body. What makes this film deeply disturbing is its exploitation of vulnerability. Pregnancy, surgery, trust in doctors, all are slowly stripped away as the truth emerges. The threat is internal, invasive, and unstoppable. Body horror was rarely this explicit on television at the time. Scenes imply internal damage, infection, and transformation without graphic visuals, yet the implications are unmistakable. The fear comes from what cannot be seen but absolutely felt. The hospital setting removes all escape. Authority figures dismiss warnings, procedures continue, and the protagonist is trapped physically and emotionally. The sense of isolation becomes suffocating. What pushed The Intruder Within too far was its violation of bodily autonomy on network television. The idea that one's body could be hijacked without consent struck deep fears, especially for female viewers. It was not monster movie fun, it was personal terror. Broadcast standards struggled with the themes, yet the film aired largely intact, and for many viewers, it became unforgettable. The Intruder Within proved that the most terrifying horror does not chase you, it grows inside you. Number 3. Don't Go to Sleep, 1982. Don't Go to Sleep weaponizes grief in a way that television horror almost never dared. The story follows a teenage girl surviving a tragic accident that kills her younger sister. What begins as a slow drama about trauma soon mutates into something far more sinister. The dead sister does not stay gone. She returns through mirrors, dreams, and reflections, not as a comforting presence, but as something angry, demanding, and dangerous. Each appearance escalates the threat, and the violence grows more explicit with every scene. What makes this film go too far is how it targets children and families. Death scenes are cruel and sudden. Characters are punished without mercy. The ghost does not seek closure. She seeks revenge, and the audience is forced to watch helplessly. Several sequences push broadcast limits through implication alone. Broken glass, electrical hazards, and falls are staged with disturbing realism. The camera lingers just long enough to make each moment hurt. There is no playful supernatural logic here, only rage. Even more unsettling is the emotional cruelty. Parents are powerless, authority figures fail, and the protagonist is blamed rather than protected. Television audiences were not used to horror that punished survivors so brutally. Don't Go to Sleep crossed a line by presenting grief itself as a curse that spreads and kills. It offered no safe lesson, no comforting message, only the suggestion that tragedy invites more tragedy. For viewers watching late at night, that was unbearable. Number 2. Without Warning, 1980. Without Warning aired with little fanfare and left behind genuine fear. Framed like a news report, the film depicts a small town slowly realizing it is under attack by something not of this world. Meteor fragments crash across the countryside. People vanish, authorities are confused, and the audience is placed inside the uncertainty rather than above it. There is no music to guide emotions, only silence, panic, and speculation. What pushed this TV movie too far was its creature design and violence. The alien weapons are organic living parasites that burrow into human bodies. Once attached, they explode, killing instantly. The implication alone was horrifying for television audiences. Scenes of victims collapsing, screaming, and dying were unprecedented for network broadcasts. The film does not soften the impact. It treats death as sudden and meaningless, just like a real invasion would. The news format adds another layer of terror. Viewers were conditioned to trust that style of presentation. Some believed they were watching real coverage. The lack of dramatic framing made everything feel closer. Too close. Without warning, crossed a line by making alien horror feel plausible. It stripped away fantasy and replaced it with confusion, panic, and helplessness for a made-for-TV movie. That was far too effective. Number 1. Dark Night of the Scarecrow, 1981. Dark Night of the Scarecrow is often remembered as quiet horror, but its impact is anything but gentle. This television film tells a story of injustice, cruelty, and revenge that unfolds slowly and deliberately. A mentally disabled man is falsely accused of harming a child and brutally killed by vigilantes. The town moves on, but the land does not forget. Nor does the Scarecrow watching silently from the fields. What makes this film go too far is its moral weight. The violence is not supernatural at first. It is human, cold, and casual. The lynching is portrayed without spectacle, which makes it more disturbing. As revenge unfolds, the deaths feel deserved, yet still horrifying. The Scarecrow becomes a symbol of guilt rather than a monster. Each killing reflects the original crime, and the audience is forced to confront complicity. The horror comes from atmosphere, wind, silence, fields at night. Television rarely allowed such bleak pacing. There is no humor, no relief, only consequence. Dark Night of the Scarecrow crossed the line by showing that the real horror was the town itself, not the supernatural aftermath. It trusted viewers to sit with discomfort, and decades later, they still do. These television horror movies were not meant to be this intense. They aired in homes. They reached children, and they left scars that never faded. If you remember watching any of these late at night, you already know some TV horror went way too far, and that is exactly why it still haunts us today.